Hello, and welcome back to Everyone's a Critic, the podcast where two guests talk about a movie that they have differing opinions on. Same rules as always, almost anything goes. Just try not to get into huge, nasty debates about it. After all, it is still just a movie, and today we are going to be talking about a movie that practically started a culture war. Some thought, some would argue, it was like the worst thing to happen to Star Wars since the holiday special, which I don't really agree with, honestly. Um, but we are talking about The Last Jedi. Uh, with joining me is my guest, Hayden Lummus, or how do you pronounce your last name? I always get last names or first names wrong.
Names in general. No, that's all good. Everyone generally pronounces it Loomis. I go by Lummus just because that's just how it looks to me.
Okay. So, Hayden, could you, before we get started, just introduce yourself to the audience?
Of course I can. Hello, audience. My name is Hayden. As you already heard, I'm a actor and screenwriter, and currently in Georgia, trying to make the best of acting here and whatnot.
Just out of curiosity, before we get started, like, what's the acting scene like in Georgia?
Basically, you're going to be doing a lot of background work.
Ah,
So yeah, that's kind of like the one of the biggest things here is like because of all the tax incentives, everything comes down here to film. And I've also kind of taken to calling Atlanta the LA of the South, especially the traffic.
yeah, I've noticed that actually I have family in Georgia and they have told me that, there were like or there are like a lot of films that film here. Once when we visited, we just went to see I think they were filming the Dwayne Johnson film Rampage and
Mm.
the one where he's like fighting zoo animals or something.
Yeah, it's like mutated zoo animals and stuff. Like one of them was like his like best friend or something, like a mutated gorilla.
Yeah,
I
and
think if although to be honest, all his movies are kind of like very similar in a lot of ways.
honestly, I haven't seen a lot of his movies.
You ain't missing
But
much.
yeah. God, trying to even remember which ones I've seen. I think I saw Be Cool. Oh no, I have seen Be Cool. God, is it just Be Cool?
That's not
Uh,
cool of you.
I don't know. I'm sure I'll get off it and say, "Oh wait, no, I've seen him in that." Yeah, you know what?
Yeah,
I
literally we'll be in the middle of a discussion. You'll be like, oh, wait a minute, Red One.
no, I
And
did
then
not.
immediately depression as you've seen Red One.
Yeah. No, I can say for certainty I have not seen Red One.
Oh, that's good. Yeah, like
Yeah.
definitely don't watch that. Like spare yourself that misery.
Okay, well, yeah, I don't know, it's funny. I usually like sort of twisted Christmas tales, but even that I was just looking at it and was like, meh, I've got
Mhm.
Violent Night. I don't need this.
Yeah, exactly. It's like from a concept it sounds interesting, but then when you watch it, it's like it just feels generic.
Yeah, I believe it. Um, but yeah, while I think if I've seen Dwayne The Rock Johnson in anything, I'll be honest, The Fast and the Furious is one of those franchises I have not seen a single movie of. I know I'm like one of the few people in the world who's never seen a Fast and the Furious movie.
That's kind of amazing because like even I don't intentionally go out to watch them at theaters, but it's like I'll just catch them on TV and I'm like, you know what? There's nothing else on. I'll just let it play.
I mean, I think I've like had I do think once like when I was at like a hotel, I one of them was I think when I went to like the gym and like one of them was, or like I turned the TV on and I just let, and like one of them was on and I just let it play on in the background, but I wasn't like
Yeah,
fully,
you weren't like going out to the movie theater to watch the next Fast and Furious movie.
no. But
And
speaking
then Vin
of
Diesel shows up and is like, there's not very family of you.
yeah, well, Vin, I'll tell you this, Vin, I like your other big action franchise, and I've seen all of those movies. But well, then again, Guardians of the Galaxy has way less movies than Fast and the Furious does, so it's
And he
easier to
basically can
them.
just like say the same one line over and over again.
Yeah, but he's
Which,
still
let's be honest, they probably had him record it like, okay, here, do 5 different takes on it. Okay, you're good to go home, Vin.
yeah. But honestly, he still gets paid probably way more than we're ever gonna see.
Yep, ain't that the truth?
Yeah, so we've gone from action franchises to sci-fi franchises while avoiding the sci-fi franchise. We're going to talk about today, like basically, some might say the granddaddy of sci-fi franchises. I am, of course, talking about what one Lucille Bluth coined the term coined Star War. And we are going to not just watch a Star War, we are going to talk about a Star War.
Hopefully, we will not have a Star War.
Yeah, actually, originally my plan was to have someone who liked The Last Jedi and someone who hated The Last Jedi talk to each other. But I realized the last two movies I've talked about, I've been rather negative on. So I was like, I like The Last Jedi fine. I'm not sure I'm passionate about it enough to like really defend it, but I'm like, I also don't want to be like kind of like the host who just seems to hate every movie or
That's
dislike
why
every
I'm here.
movie. Yeah. Yeah, but so yeah, take on the I'm gonna take on the mantle of the one who at least likes the movie, even if I wouldn't really put it in like my top faves of anything. Um, but yeah, and I will say why I say I liked it, but I don't say I loved it or thought it was a fave is I do agree with at least some of the criticisms, if not all. I haven't really looked into why people dislike the Holdo subplot. But whatever the reason is, I don't like the Holdo subplot either. I think it's a little contrived that they withhold information from this loose cannon who got a bunch of people killed and make it look like she's like some secret villain, but then it turns out she's not and she was in the right after all. But it's like it's kind of stupid of them to withhold information. It's like if you did actually tell him like none of it like he wouldn't have tried to stage a mutiny.
Yeah, like to piggyback off that too, it's like you're having us like look at this from the point of view of Poe, who is a loose cannon in this movie, but he wasn't in the previous movie because we barely got to actually, get that information. Like if he was always loose cannon, that's something we didn't get from the previous movie. And that's kind of one of the like fundamental problems with what happened with this whole trilogy. It's because two directors with two uniquely different visions couldn't actually mesh together. Like even though like in the original trilogy there was like George directed episode 4 and 6, and then I'm blanking on who the guy who directed episode 5 was, but there was still like a clear like through line vision for all three movies, and that clearly wasn't present here, which is why we get scenes like what you're talking about with Poe, like just being this loose cannon, kind of just only for this movie really.
Yeah,
because it's not something that really kind of gets addressed to like a satisfactory enough degree to feel like, okay, that makes sense. He's a loose cannon. It's like we weren't given that information in the seventh movie, and also too, we're having to just trust this character that we, the audience, don't know. We are only like we're trusting the characters we inherently know from the previous movie and who we've been following through eight at this point.
yeah, and to piggyback off of that, I do think the hatred toward Rose is overblown. I don't love the character. I wouldn't say she's like a top 10 Star Wars character. I think she's fine as a character, but I will say I do find it funny, on a rewatch that people said that she had no bearing on the plot when the movie originally came out, when it actually feels like she has more of an active role in the plot, piggybacking off of what you said than Finn did. It feels like she actually does more in that subplot than Finn does, and Finn kind of just follows her around and listens to her exposit. And at the end, when it does feel like he's more gonna have an active role, she ends up stopping him.
Yeah, like it. She kind of, honestly, and I've heard these points too, where it's like you could just cut their essentially side quest, if you want to call it, out of the movie. Fundamentally, nothing does really change at the end of the day. And but that's like I can kind of see that point too, but like Rose and Finn are kind of just like plot devices when it just needs to cut, like when the movie just needs to cut to something different to a degree, because like what do they actually like if the whole goal is to say like they did all this and they failed anyway, okay, sure, but it probably would have been better if they kept it more central to the actual conflict on the main ship and then having them somehow fly away and also not get attacked by the First Order, not have anyone go after them. Because once all those ships started, fleeing later on in the movie, they're like, guns blazing for them, but somehow they're able to sneak off the ship and no one bats an eye. All to go to Canto Bight, which the whole, honestly, like kind of the whole premise of that, like side quest, I'm going to call it, is like just to say like both sides buy weapons, so both sides are kind of bad. Like to dumb it down to like the kind of like most simplistic point that I feel like the movie was sort of trying to say is like, oh well, they both get weapons and everyone else is profiting from it. And it's like, okay, but you're not going far enough with this idea, Ryan. Like if you actually want to go with this idea, you actually have to go further. If you actually want to say that maybe there is a lot of like shades of gray to both sides of this conflict that we, the audience, barely know anything of. Like even though we didn't have a like as much a frame of reference back in episode 4 when the whole thing began, that was starting a franchise to begin with. This is like taking place after events that we like people who have already seen these movies already understand. And even if you haven't seen the movies, you already understand that there is this like universe.
Well, I will say this, I'm not entire I get where you're coming from to an extent. On the other hand, I will say I do think like it kind of ties back into the movie's main themes of disillusionment and realizing that everything is as simple or as black and white, but sort of learning from the past to help build a brighter future, or, whether or not some people can. And I feel like that is sort of what the subplot, at least that point where you're saying how it was showing that, both sides are bad, both sides profit off of it. Like it's led to some world building on learning that not just both sides are bad, but that one side is more morally gray while the other side is completely bad, but that we can learn, from the mistakes. Like I feel like that's sort of what in general, Luke's arc was in the movie, especially was that he was so disillusioned because he felt like he had failed Kylo. He had felt like he had failed the Jedis and just felt like that because he had failed what he thought was sort of like the Jedi way, that made him less of a hero, and he almost let it consume him, but he realized that, as Master Yoda said,
Time it is. For you to look past a pile of old books.
The sacred Jedi texts.
Oh, read them, have you?
Well,
Page turners, they were not.
yes, yes, yes.
Wisdom they held, but that library contained nothing that the girl Rey does not already possess.
like, it's really all about sort of growing and learning from the past. So now that I think about it, I'm not sure it's necessarily that I quite agree it was saying that both sides are bad necessarily, but that both sides profit off of the same system, but like with learning, with growth, like one side can achieve better results.
I think why it rubs me the wrong way is it comes across like the type of hypocrisy trolling that we see in modern day that never works. It never accomplishes anything. So that's why it kind of just like frustrates me to see that it's like, okay, you're trying to say something, but it seems like you're trying to just hypocrisy troll this idea to try and get it across instead of like going further with it, taking it to its next logical steps. Because especially because we have Finn, who was a stormtrooper, who became, like you said, disillusioned with it, and he switched sides. But if we're gonna try to follow that disillusionment, we have to go further because we only get that one scene to show us maybe we might need to question the resistance, and then it's never addressed again. We never question the resistance because it felt like it was trying to do that, but it didn't have the guts to actually like go a step further.
I get what you're saying, that it could have maybe, developed that theme just a little more. But I will say, on the other hand, I do think that it really all sort of boils down to the main plot. Kylo, Rey, and Luke are sort of like three mirrors responding to the same conflict. Kylo has fully embraced the dark side, and even when he is in a position where, despite his doubts about whether or not he should be really following this path, when he's finally in a position where he could escape and join the resistance, he decides that he doesn't want to. He now actually wants to be the main villain. Rey is the one who struggles a bit with thinking about whether or not she should really be joining the resistance, really be a Jedi. But at the end of the day, maintains that optimistic outlook and realizes that she can be a good person, that they can fight this war to the very end. Luke is sort of someone who has seemingly given up, but again, develops this arc where he realizes that the simplistic ideals he has held on to can actually be further developed, and he isn't the failure that he thought he was.
Well, I think the biggest problem with that whole like section, like segments of the movie where it was like on that island with Luke and Rey, is that we're just being told all this stuff happened with Luke and Kylo, and like we're only shown one scene from three different perspectives. And of course, two of them are just sort of like, deceptions of the reality based on their own perceptions to a degree. But it's like we never actually get to see more of like what happened between those two that led to that. We're just supposed to take it at face value that this is what happened, even though it's like, because it's also you're trying to tell an audience who grew up with like Luke as this optimistic guy who was willing to like do anything to bring his father back to the side of good because he saw good in him still. And it's like he could have just killed his father, but he never did. Like all he did, he literally disarmed him, so to say, but he still didn't, and it was just a robot hand, but still. It's just a hard leap of logic to say that he would have been willing to actually kill his own nephew. It's difficult to like wrap one's head around that because it's like somehow he has to have fallen so far he's willing to do that now when you would think he should have learned from that. And if we're going to say, oh, well, like you're saying, he's holding on to these old ideas, problem is we're not shown that because we never get to, like, we just have to assume that's the case because we're being told. We're not being shown. We're being told.
Well, I will say, about these flashback scenes, like, it was a bit of a different situation with how he had to deal with Vader versus what happened with Kylo. You know,
Who Vader, by the way, essentially caused genocides on other planets. So someone who arguably is 100 times worse, who did a million worse things than Kylo at that point in time in his life, before Kylo joined the First Order.
like you said, we're being shown the scene from different perspectives. Kylo thinks he was trying to kill him. Luke says basically that for a second he was worried. Now, you're right that
And well, there's also a third scene where he also does lie too, and then be like, "Oh no, he was, I was the one trying to be like, oh God, no, he's destroying it." Like that scene where it's like Luke, like that first initial scene where like Luke kind of tells a lie, but then then he says for a split second he was.
What I mean is when he had to deal with Vader, when he was thinking about whether or not, he could bring his father back to the side of good, talk sense into his father, like he was for most of the time, he was away from Vader. In the scene with Kylo, though, it seemed like, if we believe his perspective, if we believe his version of the scene of what happened, he was kind of just having a quick panic attack. Honestly, like I wouldn't literally say that my first thought ever would be let's kill someone. But like he was envisioning, like he said he saw a darkness in him. He was worried he was going to kill everyone he loved. Like he was like making a quick snap decision that again, if we're to believe his side of the story, he said he instantly stopped, he instantly regretted, but it wasn't quick enough. And, again, if we're to believe his side of the story, and we do know Luke better than we know Kylo, so I kind of believe his side of the story. He just wasn't quick enough, but like I've made like quick snap decisions that like I instantly regretted. Again, not, oh no, something bad's gonna happen, let's go murder someone, nothing that extreme, but like I can kind of see where he's coming from with Kylo versus where he's coming from with Anakin slash Vader, where he had more time to contemplate and realize he could change his father.
Okay, but Kylo was a kid though, and he's the one who's essentially raising him. So it's like, you would think he would have more time to, since he's actually spending time with him to try and help him, to mold him, to train him, to try and like not succumb to those dark thoughts. And because here's the problem. We have to believe that this was the moment where he's like, okay, he's going to do this, but this is the only time we see in these flashbacks that was a thing. Like, what they should have, like, what Ryan should have done is have a few more flashbacks of Kylo training with, the rest of the Jedis at Luke's temple or wherever it was. That we see burning at one point. See him training, but see him giving in to these dark tendencies to actually give that like worry more validity than just he held his hand and he sensed the darkness in him. And it's like, you could literally do that about anyone, dude. Like, I'm sorry, but everyone is capable of darkness. It's just like, but it's like, do you actually, succumb to that darkness or not? So to say that just because he sensed darkness in Kylo, that he had this moment of like weakness, of hesitation. But it's like, dude, you could probably sense that in everyone. You could probably sense that on everyone on the island that you secluded yourself to. So
Well,
I think it's like if we actually saw Kylo giving into dark tendencies, like maybe getting more aggressive in like sparring matches, nearly killing a fellow like Jedi student, and Luke having to step in, then it would give more validity to this worry that Luke had.
Well, I do kind of actually agree that it could have been a little fleshed out and further developed. And, with the amount of Disney Plus shows, I'm kind of surprised Disney hasn't made a show about that.
I mean, they're trying. They're trying to slowly kind of flesh it out. Like with that one episode of Boba Fett where we see Luke and Baby Yoda, who's I know it's not his actual name, but Baby Yoda is always going to stick in my head. But they're slowly, subtly trying to kind of flesh out, like, you know, everything connecting from the original to the sequel trilogy, and having kind of showing that maybe Luke wasn't the best teacher. But it's like it but that's the thing. It's like watching this when the movie initially came out, you're having to like make some leaps to get to the point the director wants you to be at. And now we're having to do all this stuff to kind of justify why it all got to this point. And it's like, I'm sorry, that's not a good sign to essentially explain away the decisions characters make in later movies, essentially.
Yeah, well, it doesn't help that, I'll be honest, Book of Boba Fett, I got bored with it so quickly, I didn't even get to the point where Grogu showed up. I just heard about it. Well, that is also something I will say in The Last Jedi's defense. It's hard to say it is the worst Star Wars scene ever when something like the Curse of Boba Fett exists.
Or
Or
Rise
not
of
the first one.
Skywalker.
Yeah, or the Rise of Skywalker, of course. Oh my God, did I just say the Curse of Boba Fett?
I mean, you're not wrong.
The book,
Honestly, I feel like that would have been a better title for the show. The Curse of Boba Fett.
more like I found it so dull.
Yeah, it really was.
Yeah. Yeah, or you know what? Again, The Mandalorian season 3. Yeah, I guess that's the thing. Like, again, I'm not gonna say that The Last Jedi was perfect, but it at least had some ambition. It wasn't either just forgettable or a complete shapeless blob.
Yeah, it's like I will give it props. Like visually, yeah, it's great. Um, but yeah, like I still have issues with it. And look, if anyone's going to say that this movie is just a flawless 10 out of 10, no flaws whatsoever, I'm sorry. Every movie, every piece of media has flaws. If you can't accept it, then you can't accept imperfections, and imperfections is reality. Like I'll still love a movie even though it has flaws because I love it in spite of the flaws.
Yeah, and the same thing is true for like, movies you dislike. Like very few movies are 0 out of 10, horrible, nothing good, wastes of space. Like, even
Like I was, unless they're like fundamentally like, you know, like dangerous to society in a sense.
yeah, that's true. But even then,
Like, you know, Butterfly Effect, the director's cut ending that essentially glorifies self-deletion.
oh, thanks for letting me know about that. I will not watch that movie. But yeah, like, I was mentioning in the first two episodes, like, I did have nice things to say about it, even if I didn't like the products overall. And, it's
Yeah.
like again, with The Last Jedi, I think some, I think there's enough good material for me to say it is a good, not great movie. And again, it's visually striking, beautifully scored. Most of the acting is at least competent. I will say that in hindsight, I know John Boyega was kind of vocal that he wasn't a big fan of how Finn's writing and how it turned out. And I love him as an actor. I think he's been great in most of the things he's been in. I think you can kind of see the lack of passion in this one. Like
And the fact that it's specifically for his character for all three movies is like it really does show. And it's like, come on, you had an ex-stormtrooper here. Like, there's so much interesting things to tell. Like, here's the thing, and here's one thing I'll give Last Jedi credit for. Promise it's a deleted scene, but when they're Finn and Rose are sneaking onto the ship, there's this stormtrooper who recognizes Finn and it's like, hey, look at you got promoted, good for you, buddy. Like it was one of those little things that kind of showed that there were like these were also people. They still kind of like knew each other, and like I don't know, it's one of those things that I wish they actually kept in the movie because I think it would have helped to kind of like maybe flesh out this other side a little bit more than having them all be mindless people who are just following orders except for this one guy Finn. Because if one of them could defect, what's to say more of them also could defect? But it also kind of paints them so black and white, and Finn's just that one exception to the rule.
Following that, with Rise of Skywalker, that they can fly now line.
They fly now! They fly now!
Like, dude, you're an ex-stormtrooper. How do you not know
You
that?
should know that. They've been flying for years.
Yeah. Yeah, I was saying, like, with Last Jedi, it does kind of feel like a lot of his performance is kind of samey. Like, he says every...
Like he's just a comedic relief character, essentially.
No, I just mean the way he's delivering his lines is kind of very samey. Like, he's delivering all his lines in the same kind of hushed tone all the time.
And so you blew up Starkiller Base. Yeah. Ray beat Kylo, the Resistance got the map. You won, right?
Well, either a hushed tone or just like screaming out everything. Oh God, what's happening? Everything's going crazy. Like,
yeah,
it's either the hushed tone or like these big reactions to things happening to him.
Yeah, I will also say, like, The Last Jedi's other flaws is that the humor does feel a lot more over the top than most Star Wars movies. Like, the scene where he's like in the white thingamajig, whatever that was, and there's like water spraying all over, and it does kind of clash with the dark, serious tone the rest of the movie has.
Yeah, I can't tell if this was like something intentional by the director or like a producer note, but it's like it is a consistent problem the movies have had, like trying to have this forced humor instead of writing it in a way that comes off, more natural.
It's kind of like what people think Marvel humor is like sometimes.
Like there was great moments of humor in the original trilogy, and in the prequel trilogy too, to be honest. Like, there were some nice... I mean, I'm not counting Jar Jar, of course. Like, Jar Jar's forced, but aside from Jar Jar, yeah, there were definitely moments where there was some nice bits of humor, but it's like, watching the sequel trilogy try to do humor and try to replicate Marvel, it's like, no, you guys are trying too hard, and it shows.
Yeah, well, speaking of Jar Jar, like, I remember people, like, at the time of The Last Jedi's release were saying that, because I was saying that I felt the hate for Rose was overblown. Like, people were saying, like, that even Jar Jar is a better character than her, and they were like, well, he was at least relevant to the plot, and I was thinking, yeah, well, I don't care with that personality, honestly. I'll take a bunch of roast ticas over.
Oh, muy, I love you.
You almost got us killed. Are you brainless?
I speak.
The ability to speak does not make you intelligent. Now get out of here.
No, Mr. Stay. Mr. called Jar Jar Binks. Mr. your humble servant.
I mean, I don't know, like, I feel like there was, like, another direction, like, they wanted to go with it, but because of the reception, that, it kind of got scrapped, because he became, Jar Jar was just a useful pawn for, like, the rise of the Empire, essentially. So, I don't know, I'm wondering, it's one of those things that has me wondering if there was another direction they wanted to go with that, and I'm just wondering, like, this direction they went with Rose, I'm like, they could have done a lot more with it, because she does feel like a plot device for Finn. To be like, hey, Finn, here's, how the world really works. And it's like, okay, but, like, if they were going to say, like, oh, maybe he was just, because of the indoctrination from the First Order, then it's like, y'all could have done a lot more with that too then. But she just comes across like a plot device when needed. Like, when Finn's about to sacrifice himself, here comes the Rose plot device to stop him.
I will say, I do almost wonder if some of those things, were going to be fleshed out more in The Rise of Skywalker until, the movie got the reception it did, and then Disney was just like, oh, fuck, people aren't liking these ideas. Let's just do whatever we can to downplay them or ditch them altogether.
Yeah, it definitely had to do with the reception, for sure. Yeah, it's definitely one of those things where it has me wondering if they went with the Colin Favreau script for the ninth movie, then maybe it wouldn't have been the mess that we got, unfortunately, with Rise of Skywalker.
Wait, was it Favreau or was it wasn't it Colin Trevorrow, or did they both have script for the ninth movie?
Maybe it was Trevorrow. It's been so long ago, I'm blanking on the name, but I know there was like a different script that would have been a lot more with a darker tone that I think would have been obviously 100 times better than what we got with Rise of Skywalker, but anything would be.
Yeah, Yeah, I remember I think it was Colin Trevorrow because I think people were like, "Oh, the Jurassic World guy is gonna do Star Wars." And like he also had done another movie outside of Star Wars, Book of Henry, that got terrible reviews. It was terrible. And that's another thing I'll give the Last Jedi credit for. With the Book of Henry also coming out in 2017, can't say it's anywhere near the worst movie of 2017. Um, Actually surprising that a guy who actually made a contender for the real worst movie of 2017 um might have actually helped save the Star Wars franchise, but we'll never know. And I think going back to just the Last Jedi in general, I think that is sort of why I like it, would not love it, is that even if, and again, there's only so much you can put into one movie, even if it had certainly its fair share of flaws, it at least laid the groundwork for interesting themes that if Disney hadn't been scared that they weren't playing it safe enough, might have been explored well in future sequels, but unfortunately, we didn't get that.
Yeah. Although, to be honest, the Clone Wars TV show, that was originally on Cartoon Network before it went over to Netflix and then back over to Disney, we're actually doing some interesting things with the concept of what war does to you. Like one of the four-parters that really sticks out to me is when they're on this one planet with General what was his name? Craig, I want to say. It's like four arms, has the same voice actor as Lee Everett from Telltale's Walking Dead game.
Oh,
It's essentially like they're kind of doing a space Vietnam thing because they're not really fighting droids for the most part. They're essentially fighting like essentially humanoid creatures. And there's this one section that always sticks with me where they get this report that, oh, hey, there's some, enemies who have shown up. They've taken our armor. They're taking our weapons. They're pretending to be us. And in the heat of the battle, we realize, wait, that's not actually the case. These are our own guys. These are our allies. So these ideas that they've tried to do in the sequel trilogy, they've already kind of been done like better in my opinion in the Clone Wars TV show.
yeah, and I will also say that, well, I gotta be honest, I wasn't the biggest fan of Rogue One because, well, it also did try to put on a darker tone and show sort of the more the serious, heavier side of what could happen in Star Wars. The characters were a little too underdeveloped for my
Hmm.
liking, to really get invested into the plot. I do think Andor sort of
Hmm.
laid the groundwork for that type of
Hmm.
storytelling of showing the more morally gray part of Star Wars.
Yeah, no, I completely agree with that. Yeah, Andor has done wonderful things with this darker, grittier idea of Star Wars that both sides have to do a lot of, awful things to achieve their goals. It's like, and honestly, it is fun actually getting to see the Rebel Alliance having to do these these dirty tricks, these awful tactics in the, with the hope and goal of, defeating the Empire. Because it's like, that's kind of the thing. When you're in these wartime settings, you're unfortunately going to have to do a lot of bad things. And yeah, and yeah, Rogue One, I won't say it's my favorite Star Wars movie. Like I'm like in the camp where you say you like Last Jedi but not love it. That's kind of where I'm at with Rogue One. I like it. I don't love it. It's got some fun moments, but it's definitely one of those movies that walked so Andor could essentially run.
While Andor has sort of explored, the grittier side of Star Wars, uh, Skeleton Crew has sort of brought things back to the more fun, kid-friendly side in a way that actually feels fresh and exciting for the most part because it's just more about characters that happen to take place in the Star Wars universe. Like, they hear of Jedis. I'll be honest, to spoil things, I was a little disappointed at the very end when an actual Jedi ship showed up, because that was one thing that I thought was fun, that it was actually just about characters who happened to live in the Star Wars universe but
Hmm.
had no ties to the other characters. no ties to really the Empire or organization or like anything like that. But yeah, but still, it was a fun kids young adult show that just happened to be a Star War as well, just showing more like the side of like the normal people.
Hmm. Yeah, because that's something we rarely get to see. Like that and Andor are some of the few times where we've actually got to be on the ground with the everyday people of this Star Wars universe.
And I feel like The Mandalorian sort of started that, but then they had to bring in Luke, and then
I mean,
after,
I was fine with that because,
yeah,
I mean, because here's the thing, they were already bringing in Ahsoka. They were already bringing in way
yeah,
before Luke all these other characters anyway, who were like from the, the Clone Wars shows and all that other media. So it's like, if you're doing that anyway, then you know what, just go for it. Balls to the wall at that point.
yeah. Well, okay, I shouldn't say that was the problem, though. I do not I mean, it wasn't necessarily the problem that they brought in Luke. It was just more after that. It felt like they didn't really know where to take the story
Mhm.
after Grogu and Mando were reunited. So the
Well,
third
that's why they should have
season,
just stopped the story after the second season. But like, yeah, it's just they thought they could still try and get a profit off of this character just because people liked Mando and they like Grogu, but not understanding that's like it's not just these two characters we like; it's seeing the worlds that they are interacting in.
yeah, exactly. And it is sort of like again like that is sort of where the third season faltered. It just kind of felt like it didn't quite know what to do with
Mhm.
these characters moving forward. And unless it is the first movie that gets a 200% on Rotten Tomatoes and Metacritic, and
Two,
IMDb,
200 Rotten Tomatoes. You've done so well. We're actually gonna make you a pizza.
yeah, and IMDb loves it just so much. It is the first movie to get a 100 rating, not even a 10, a 100 rating. Yeah, probably skip that one because their story's been told,
Hmm.
honestly.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, and you know, I got so bored with Boba Fett so quickly. I didn't even see Ahsoka or I did see what was that Obi-Wan. It was okay.
Yeah, it just felt like it just makes me wonder why didn't you guys just stick with the movie idea for this in the first place? Because I feel like if they can like put in a movie to like an hour, like 2 hour, maybe 2.5 hour movie, then like it probably would have like fleshed out better than 6 episodes where it just kind of felt like it went on for too long and a very inconsistent character they want us to root for named Reva or Riva. I'm blanking on the pronunciation, but like I feel like it's probably Riva. Like the woman who was a Sith who suddenly changes at the last minute to be a good guy, I guess, when she defects from the Empire. But like I don't know, it just felt too forced. Especially because for some reason she decides to go after Luke, and I'm like, okay, but why though? What does that like? They didn't do anything to you. Like,
Yeah,
if you're trying to get revenge for Obi-Wan leaving you there, it's like, I'm like, girl, you clearly knew what the plan was. Like, it was kind of clear you understood what this was going to be, that you were essentially going to, like, fight Vader to the death on your own here.
yeah, but honestly, even besides that, it just kind of felt like a retread of The Mandalorian, just this time with Obi-Wan and Leia.
Hmm.
Um, and what else was there? Yeah, again, didn't see Ahsoka, didn't see that acolyte that again also had like the ugliest reaction. I don't even really care if it's good or bad, honestly. Okay, I don't even know. I don't even God, I again like I think the book of Boba Fett just got me so bored with Disney plus Star Wars that I haven't even really kept up with any of it besides Andor and Skeleton Crew.
Yeah, Andor is the only thing I kept up with. And, like, once that first season ended, I'm like, I really have no reason to have a subscription now anymore. Like, I got it back just to watch some of the, Ahsoka Tano show. And I'm like, the only saving grace of that show was Ray Donovan. Wait, hold on. Is his name Ray Donovan?
Leave Schreiber, right? Is that who you're talking about?
No. Okay, I'm gonna quickly look up his name because it's gonna bug me. But like, The main guy with the beard who was the antagonist, like he did a good job. Like he was actually like written well. I actually liked what they did with his character. But that was kind of the only saving grace of the show. Well, okay, not the only saving grace. I mean, when they brought back Anakin and like, Ahsoka was essentially on death's door, like, and they actually brought Hayden Christensen back to like, be the live action Anakin. I'm like, okay, that was great. I really did enjoy that. But the common problem with a lot of these like Star Wars shows post Mandalorian season one, I want to say, and maybe post season two as well. Although it kind of rears its head a bit in the second season, it's like they're banking on a lot of these like almost anthology like moments to kind of like sell an overall story to keep the audience engaged. But it's like you can only do that for so long, and if you're banking on these one or two specific episodes or specific moments, you're not going to like be able to hold on to a consistent fan base.
Yeah, and honestly, again, I just feel like maybe again why I even like The Last Jedi even more now is because Disney took the wrong lessons from its divisive reception and just made all these shows and movies that completely play it safe and are forgettable. They even followed up with The Last Jedi with Solo, a Star Wars story, which is an okay movie, but even then it's like, yeah, I mean,
It's mid at
yeah,
best.
did we really need to know why Solo's name needed to be called Solo?
Exactly. Like it just felt so forced and unnecessary.
Yeah, like was anyone really like just was anyone even writing fan fiction about how he met Chewbacca?
It's it's like, well, you got the Queen of Dragons in there, I guess. I mean, there's that, but like, then we have never seen her again since.
It's just you're talking about Amelia Clark, right?
Yeah, I mean, Emilia Clarke. I was, joking because Game of Thrones, but yeah, exactly. Like they introduce a character, and it's like, okay, cool, but like, why should we care? We've never seen her character since, so
Yeah. Well, I don't know. Again, that's because the movie was like the first Star Wars movie to ever bomb, although they try to make Donald Glover's Lando a show, but like even he doesn't really seem all that interested in doing
mhm.
it because like they're like we're trying to put this show into development, but we gotta wait until Donald has a script that he's happy with, and it's like it almost seems like at this point he's just like thinking, I'm almost the same age as Billy D. Williams was when he
Mhm.
played Lando, so it doesn't even make sense for me to play young Lando anymore, and
Mhm.
I'm just not interested.
Yep. And I quickly looked up the actor I was thinking of was Ray Stevenson.
Oh, okay. Yeah, though actually, yes, Donald Glover is going to be 42 this year. Billy D. Williams was 43 when he first
Mm.
played Lando.
Mhm.
So, yeah, I was right about that. He is literally the same age, or to be the same age as Billy D. Williams when he first played Lando, so it doesn't even make sense for that show to be in development anymore.
Mhm. And let's be honest, like it's gonna be tough to get an audience for a Lando show because Lando is like, they only started like, I don't know. We're trying to like, I guess, do something with that to try and expand the universe, I guess, or something. I don't know. I can't understand reasons for a Lando show because even the Star Wars universe itself has never had that much of an explicit interest in Lando. And it's like y'all trying to make an interest in something that like honestly, unfortunately, I don't think a lot of people are interested in.
Yeah, that's another problem with honestly the Star Wars shows in general is that they're really trying to make shows based off of stuff that only like major fans
Mhm.
really know about. Again, like Book of Boba Fett, like the average audience member doesn't really care much about Boba Fett other than he's that one cool Looking.
I mean, if they kept the rule of cool for him in his own show, then it probably would have done a little better. But even still, like it's tough to get an audience for that because he's a character who is just hasn't been seen since like a Return of the Jedi, then shows up again for a couple episodes of Mandalorian, and then it's just not an easy character to try and like get an audience hyped around if you're not gonna like keep consistent with the character from what we saw.
Yeah, and one thing that actually could arguably be said for the Mandalorian success, even outside of its content, is that the most popular character reminded people of one of the most popular Star Wars characters, even if
Yep.
it's actually supposed to be him.
Yep, exactly.
All right, well, I think that wraps it up here, but thanks again, Hayden, for coming onto the show.
Thanks for having me. Happy to be here.
You're welcome. So, Hayden, do you have anything to plug?
Um, well, I mean, if you're in Georgia and you happen to go by Stone Mountain Park, that's where I'll be working for a couple months.
Oh, what do you do?
Well, I'm currently an actor going to be performing in a show there.
Oh, nice. Well,
All right.
next time we're going to be going into one of the OG franchises. We've stuck to mostly modern films, anything within the last 10 years for this show. So next time we're going all the way back to the 90s to make an ancient franchise seem cool and hip to the teens because, we've done a movie for adults, we've done a movie for kids and their families, we've done a movie that is more general audience. Now, The Last Jedi. Now we're going to do a movie for teens, and we are going to be covering my least favorite Baz Luhrmann movie, Romeo plus Juliet. I will see you then, everyone.